My friend Tim and I was friends as long as I can remember. We hung out together all the time. Almost every waking moment, we'd be either playing games in the yard, riding bikes, or just exploring interesting areas in our small town. The freedom we had was unprecedented, especially for the certain times. Our little town seemed untouched by the rest of the world, a fact that my parents reveled in. We'd heard stories about how things were in the bigger cities, so we lived up the freedom that we had in the safety of our small town. Although we came to learn one year that not all danger comes from the expected places. One day we decided to build a treehouse. Our backyard was a decent size and we had one but large desolate tree. Someone had carved something at the base that looked like initials that lovers would make. And so we thought nothing more of it. Tim and I were climbing it for the millionth time when I had my treehouse epiphany. Tim was more than ready to help me beg my dad to build our fortress of solitude. It would be a sanctuary for our boys' ways, and my dad was more than excited to have a project to do. Besides, any excuse to dodge my mom's to-do list seemed like a good idea to him. So my dad got to work, and I noticed that while he seemed excited to build our treehouse, he got these funny looks from time to time. Whenever I asked, he'd change his expression real quick and say something like, I'm fine. I'm just trying to think about what to do next. Yet, I couldn't shake this feeling that he was lying to me. It didn't take him very long to finish the treehouse. Oddly, he seemed to get hurt a lot in the process, which was especially weird to him. While he worked hard and diligent, he also was a careful man. Perhaps he felt pressure to make it perfect for us. Yeah, that was it. One night, I got up to use the bathroom and heard muffled talking from my parents' bedroom. Being a stereotypical nosy kid, I tiptoed to the door as close as I would dare. Some words were muffled, but this was the gist of the conversation. I'm telling you, there's something weird about that tree. Oh, honey, it's just tired. You've been working on that thing nonstop. You should have just taken a break. That's just it. I'm not tired. In fact, every time I go over there, it was like I got this weird surge of energy. Oh, honey, you're just excited to... No, it's not it. I'd be dead tired from work, and I'd just go out there just to look at the progress. When I get near the tree, it's like it's something that's calling me, and suddenly I feel energized. Don't look at me like that. I'm not crazy. I'm not saying that. Actually, to be honest with you, I did feel something weird about that tree when I went out there to check on you. Yeah, that freaking thing gives me the creeps. But I just can't stop making the treehouse because I get a weird feeling. The guys are so excited about it. Maybe I'm more tired than I realize. I continued on to the kitchen as I heard my father's footsteps, not wanted a chance in catching it. After getting back to bed, I went over what they said. My dad was not the kind to be superstitious or get weird vibes. It was totally out of his character, but nevertheless, I eventually found myself falling back into deep sleep. I awoke to a strange sound softly stirring in my bed. Slipping from my covers, I sauntered about my room until I realized the source of the noise. With a gulp, I approached my window and I heard what seemed to be humming. My treehouse was within line of sight, but the sound wasn't coming from there. I looked down and I gasped when I saw a group of men circling at the bottom of the tree. A fire roared in the center of the kindling and they chanted in a hushed tone. My throat closed up and I tried to scream, but something wouldn't let me. Get away! Help! I willed my vocals to say, but nothing worked. I stumbled out of my room trying to make it to my parents. My hand touched the doorknob just as I felt something pull me to the ground, and grunted in pain and looked back to see this horrible creature luring back at me, showing rows of serrated teeth from a vertical mouth. It had no eyes, yet I knew it was staring into the very depths of me. The screams muted. I thrashed to get away from this horrid thing that would surely take me to my ill demise. The thing only dragged me faster, and I felt every bump of the stairs as it dragged me out of the house. The grass burned the bare skin of my back as it pulled me into the backyard. Arms of multiple men grabbed me and bound me with a leather rope. They sat me up just in time to witness something that would never leave my memory. Hanging from the ropes of the tree branch were both my parents. Hands held my head still, forcing me to look onto their bloated blue faces as they swung back and forth with my treehouse as a backdrop. The creature came back into view, and the man began chanting fervently as it opened its mouth wide and engulfed my head right before. I awoke in sweat and began crying immediately. Being at the age of 10, I made the unspoken pact to never get upset at nightmares again. This, however, was an exception. I never had a dream that felt so real before. It took my parents a while to calm me down, and it was almost an entire week before I stepped foot near that tree. When Tim and I eventually saw the inside of our treehouse, all of my thoughts of that horrible dream went to the back burner. My dad had hung up all of the decorations that we planned, and it was nothing less than awesome. Practically jumped off of the ladder to hug my smiling dad. As my dad hugged me and smiled, his eyes darted upward to the treehouse, and I saw a glimmer of dread in him. Tim and I spent every moment in the treehouse together. One of the things that we figured out was how to communicate without my parents knowing. If I was ever confined to my room, he would sneak over to the treehouse to talk to me through the tin can phone. Now, this might sound more devious than it really is, but our backyards lined up with his backyard, so it was not like he was getting far away from the safety of his home. He'd go to his backyard to play and slip through the fence to get to the treehouse. Although I was in trouble when my parents thought that we needed a little away time, we had a system to work around. And it was a good thing we did, because 3 months later, I got the flu. Tim and I spent more time ever talking through the tin can phone. And we even rigged up a clothesline with a small bucket so we could share video games, comics, and whatever else you can think of. My mom would kill me if she knew we were doing it. She was really concerned that I would get sick. We of course didn't care because I needed new things to do being stuck in my room. One night, I was getting ready for bed when I heard sound coming from the tin can. I dismissed it at first since it would pick up things like squirrels or the wind if it was a drafty day. But it persisted, and that's when I brought the tin can to my ear. "Hey, Tim?" There was eerie silence on the other end, but I swear I could hear movement. So I tugged at the clothesline, hoping that the rattle of the bucket could get his attention. I held the line for a moment until I felt a familiar tug back. So I picked up the tin can and I said, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" "Sorry," I heard Tim whisper. "I was trying to be quiet so your parents didn't hear me. I have something for you." I watched as the bucket slowly came into view, and I had out my hands to grab it. Strangely, I noticed there was no light coming from the treehouse. He really went into stealth mode for this one, I thought as I unclipped the bucket. Placing the metal container down as softly as I could, I reached in and I pulled out a Ouija board? I gasped and quickly put it back in the bucket. My parents had warned me to never mess with them. Whether you believe in spirits and demons or whatnot, you should never do it because you will open yourself up to some really bad stuff. It simply wasn't a risk worth taking. "Tim, why did you send me this?" I said with my harsh tone evident. "You don't want to play with it?" Tim said. "No, those things can be dangerous, plus I get into huge trouble for messing with them." Come on, it'll be fun." That's when I stopped for a second and thinking about how weird this was. Tim was definitely acting weird, and now that I thought about it, he was never interested in Ouija boards. Why would he suddenly want to send me one? I couldn't even stand the idea of getting in trouble for some stupid lapse of judgment he had. I immediately clipped the bucket back to the line and began feeding it back to him. When I saw it made it to the treehouse, I sat back on the bed. "Here, man, take it. I don't want it here." Tim said nothing back. Tim? There was an eerie silence, and then I heard a familiar sound of the bucket being unclipped and sat down. I tried calling him a couple more times, but he wouldn't respond. Yet I knew he was there. Despite his silence, I can faintly hear labored breathing. "Tim, stop. You're creeping me out, man. Maybe you should go back home." My pulse quickened at his repeated silence. Then the fact that it was very late dawned on me. Tim never came over here after 10 o'clock, and his weird behavior coupled with that made me very uncomfortable. "Oh, one more thing before I go," Tim whispered suddenly, making me jump. I heard the squeak of the clothesline moving, and I looked out of the window. This went on for a moment, but the bucket wasn't coming my way. "Hey, what are you sending?" I said in the tin can, but again was met with an unnerving silence. I sat back on the bed and then I felt something small drop on my shoulder. It was wet, so I looked at the clothesline and noticed something was off. Light from my bedside lamp was too low to illuminate it, so I grabbed a flashlight. Shining a light on the clothesline, I suppressed the scream when I saw the clothesline was covered in blood. I had to wait a second to calm myself down. Whatever game Tim was playing, I needed him to stop. Just as I stood up to look out of my window again, I heard the familiar sound of my doorknob turning. My heart leapt into my chest as I turned. "Honey?" The sound of my mom's voice echoed into the room. She peered in, and I instantly felt relief. "I'm awake." "You have a visitor." Cold needles pricked my skin as I saw Tim walk into the room, a puzzled look on his face. "Josh? You're not in the treehouse?" A blanket of icy needles made me visibly shiver as I turned to look back at the treehouse. There was a light on inside, illuminated the face of a ghastly creature covered in the dark smoke. He smiled back at me and waved a bloody hand. I rolled over to the floor to avoid the creature's gaze. I felt like I would go insane if I looked at it any longer. "Oh my God, Josh, what's the matter?" My mom rushed over to me. I don't remember much about that night, but I do remember stuttering out the entirety of what had happened. Apparently, Tim saw a shadowy figure climb into the treehouse. He begged his parents to bring him over to see if y'all was in my room so that way we'd know if it was a prowler. My dad had rushed outside with a gun, but found nothing except a bucket with the Ouija board still inside. He promptly burnt it. My mom didn't tell me until later, but they researched the history of our house and found out that there used to be a cult that lived inside of our house. They used our tree in the backyard for ritual sacrifices, some of which included hanging people for one of the limbs. The next day, my dad destroyed the treehouse and we never played in the backyard again. For years, my dad swore he heard chanting and an occasional scream from that awful tree. He took it one step further and cut the tree down completely. Even then, he would sometimes hear the rhythmic creak of wood as if something was swaying to and fro from a phantom limb. Good evening, everyone. This is Yuri K, and this is the end of the video. Please leave a comment and let us know your opinions on the matter. If you happen to like this content, please check out our other videos. Make sure you like and share amongst your friends and family to help our community grow. You happen to be new to this channel? Please make sure you subscribe. It's free and you can always change it in the future. You have some terrifying story suggestions? If so, make sure that you send it to my email, fearofthedarkstories@gmail.com, and I'll feature it in a future segment. But you guys stay safe out there, and remember to always be afraid of the dark.